Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. Let me tell you about an amazing sponsor who helps make this show possible. I hope that you'll take a look at Drips, the founders of conversational texting, where they use conversational AI to help you reach customers where they're most responsive, and that's on their phones. And working with major brands like 3-Day Blinds, Liberty Mutual, Credit Repair, and Gainsco, Drips is leading the way for some of the biggest brands in the world to improve engagement rates and outcomes for their prospects and customers. And now, back to the show. Legally speaking about marketing, what's your responsibility in business when using things like graphics on social or influencers in campaigns? You're going to live stream or have your employees on Clubhouse. What are the implications to consider, whether it's a legality issue, reputation, social media, or other? Important considerations not only for the fines you could get if you violate certain laws, but also for your reputation for your brand or agency. It can be kind of a big deal. Kerry O'Shea Gorgone is an editor, writer, lawyer, speaker, marketer, co-host of The Backpack Show with Chris Brogan, co-host of Punch Out with Katie and Kerry, and host of a classic alternative radio show for villageradio.net. And on this episode, we'll discuss legal mistakes that marketers make, career transitioning from law to marketing, getting an Ann Handley forever tattoo, copyrighted content and using stuff without other people's permission, optimizing those Google images, and then getting slapped with a fine. Third parties, influencer marketing and disclosure, expensive mistakes with bad beach photos, stock photography, live streaming, copyrighted music, reputation management, saying something stupid on Clubhouse, riding a Viking shark, Patriots and Titans, coring apples, and a lot more. So let's tune in to Kerry O'Shea Gorgone with Kenneth O'Shark Kinney on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Kerry, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Would you please tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date?
Sure. Let's see. I grew up on Cape Cod and went to law school in Boston. And since then, I've lived in Florida and currently reside in Tennessee. So along the way, I have practiced law, I have taught law, I have been in marketing, and I have taught marketing. And I transitioned eventually into like adult learning and training, as opposed to teaching undergraduate students and graduate students, which I was doing before. And that's sort of where I am at the moment now in marketing again, that educational marketing. So my department is the customer content and customer education department. So.
Well, what inspired you to be a lawyer? I mean, I've heard your story a little bit, but I don't know if I've ever asked you what inspired you to be a lawyer.
My mom, she was like, be a lawyer. And I was like, no. And then I did.
Yeah, of course.
That's about it. Yeah. Well, in the absence of something else that I clearly wanted to do, it made good use of my talents. And there was a lot of things to commend it. I also had a pretty strong mentor, one of my favorite law professors in college. I took his course by accident because I went down. This is like way back in the day before it was easy to register online and stuff. It was, you had to go down and do arena registration, they called it. So they let us all loose like cattle inside the gym and we had to go wait in lines to register for things. So it was a lot easier to like screw up. So there was no line for this one law class. And I'm like, I'll just take this one. I don't care. And I didn't realize that it wasn't the business law class I had to have. It was a consumer law class that was like an elective. So it took up one of my valuable elective slots and I still had to take the stupid business law class. But the professor was great. I loved him so much and I loved the topic and everything else. And we just really bonded. And so I ended up taking him, Cy Horvitz was his name. I took him for business law 1 and 2 and worked for him at the consumer action line that he ran, like mediating consumer complaints for the attorney general. And so he had as much to do with me going to law school as anyone. And he's the reason I went to Suffolk, where I later graduated first in my class. It was like, that was his alma mater. So
you were in the legal field for several years. I know you litigated as well. And I've heard you talk a little bit about, you saw some legal websites that weren't very good. And you started making that move. Was that really the inspiration? Because I mean, or did you just wake up one day and know you wanted to be in marketing, or how did that transition progress?
No. Okay. So when I was at Bentley University, I was taking business courses. I have a Bachelor of Science in Business Communication and an MBA in International Business. So that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to do marketing and business. And while I was at Bentley, I was working in marketing. So while I was taking law courses, because they were required and because I stumbled into the wrong one when I was in arena registration, I was really going into business and marketing. And that's where I was to begin with. What happened was that Cy inspired me to go to law school. So I turned down a job offer in marketing and went to law school instead. And once I had done that, what I discovered afterwards while I was doing litigation is that I still needed the creative pursuits that marketing entails. Like I was working on the firm website, or I was making videos of like the law firm's reception events and things like that. I still needed some of that more creative work to kind of fuel me on a personal level in a way that the more cut and dry advocacy stuff wasn't doing for me.
Yes, a lot of overachieving though in education. You get your jurisprudence and an MBA, and I graduated from the 13th grade. So you
My
you have
Juris
done
Doctor.
you have done well.
No, I mean, the secret is just keep going and work hard. I used to work all the time though. I would get up in the morning because I'm a morning person. My very first job was at a bakery. So I started as a dishwasher. And by the time I graduated from graduate school, I'd worked there every summer, done about every job in the place. But long story short, I wake up early. I always have. And so I would wake up early in law school, do all my work first thing, like commute into the city first thing, and then do my classes. Then I'd go home and like watch Animaniacs.
Right.
And totally screw off the whole rest of the night. Like I just needed to.
And now, like me, you've got kids, so that makes you wake up early anyway. So,
Oh, they're teenagers now, though. I mean,
okay.
if it wasn't for the fact that school requires them to be physically present at 7:45 for my youngest, which is stupid because he's doing virtual. So like, why? I don't know. But anyway, if it wasn't for that, they would sleep much later. And my oldest, it's like anybody's guess. And so whatever he wants to.
Did you get your tats? Because you and I both share a love of tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
Did you get your tattoos while you were in a lawyer, or was this before or after, or when?
No. So by then I was working with marketing profs. And so I was in training. So educational content and training for adult learners and things like that in the area of business and marketing. And I hadn't found anybody I trusted to do my tattoos. That was the reason I didn't have any. I just was like, like I said, I didn't trust anybody. And so I started taking guitar lessons as part of this initiative marketing profs had that was like, oh, spend 5 hours a week learning something new. I mean, like they didn't pay for it or whatever, but I got to go I went and took guitar lessons. Everyone's like, you should learn to code. Like Christopher Penn was like, oh yeah, you should learn R or Python. And I was like, no. So I took guitar lessons and my instructor had ink. And so I looked at his and his was really nice, but I was like, it's not really my style, but he said it's his style. So this artist is so good. She takes a photo inspiration or something, whatever you bring her for ideas, and creates a custom sketch based on what you want. And then she places it like a stencil or something on you to make sure the fit's right and everything, that it's situated in a good spot. And then she does it and she's amazing. So looking at his, the only hesitation I had was it wouldn't be my style, but that was his style, and then she did my style. So that was later. But not because I was like afraid or anything. It's just because I didn't.
Well, at least we're in an environment where it's more normal, if you will, to see it. It's not.
Yeah.
I don't know that I necessarily would have cared.
Mine are pretty big though. Like it goes all the way around.
Oh, yeah, I got a shark one the same way. For the audience who can't see this, we're taking off our clothes and showing everybody.
We're gonna show our tattoos. Yeah, that's it. But no, it's pretty big, and it goes. That one I'm still working on. It's gonna go all the way down.
I've got one that says Anne Hanley. Everybody writes
Anne Hanley forever.
Anne Hanley forever.
Yeah, that's like next level sucking up.
And I'm also going to put a Cavalier King Charles. So I wanted to talk to you, obviously, about marketing and legal and where this crosses. Having worked on the brand side a lot in my career as well, I was really thinking a lot about this since we spoke a few weeks ago. But what do you see as the most problematic thing right now for marketers to consider with everything going on today in marketing, and how that has a legal implication anymore?
That's such a broad question. Let me think. The same old problems that have always existed continue to exist, which is the desire to use somebody else's stuff without permission. You see it all the time. They're like, this is great. This is GIF or this meme. This is really popular right now. We'll just throw that on social, or we'll use it in our marketing. And it will, we'll kind of have this winking complicity with our audience. Like, see, we're cool. We're cool. And you can't do it because it's not your content and it sucks and everything, but you can't. So that comes up over and over. It's kind of like a perennial problem. The newer problem is influencer marketing, where people are still trying to figure out like how they can even incorporate influencers into their marketing And moreover, if they even think about disclosure, how to do it without, how to do it appropriately, like early and often and clearly. And so the influencers on the one hand want their campaigns to be successful. They also don't necessarily want people to feel like they're getting barraged with advertising all the time, because then their audience might just take off and do something else. But at the same time, if you are doing marketing for people all the time, and that's what your feed is, like, you have to be transparent about that. So that's a little bit of a sticky situation too. And that's a little newer. Like the copyright thing is kind of ages old. It's as old as time. It's like an age old problem. The influencer stuff, I think, is a little different now because of who influencers are. Like it used to be celebrities. Everybody understood if you see a celebrity on a Wheaties box, like they got paid for that. Everybody gets it. It's not the same if you see, somebody with a mom blog or something, or a parenting blog. I shouldn't say just moms, but a parenting blog. Like you might not know that the stroller they're pushing, they got for free. It's like a whole different world in which we operate.
At least from borrowing graphics, memes, GIFs, anything else like that. What do you recommend to somebody if they do make the mistake of putting something on their social or their blog post or something? Because I think a lot of people find this out after they get their hand slapped.
Yeah, and hand slapping can be very, very expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
So the number one thing is never ever look on Google for images to accompany your posts, social posts, blog posts, or anything that could be construed as marketing. So you don't have to show that you made any money from it. Like most people don't make money directly from a blog or whatever. It's content. It like feeds your lead generation funnel and all that stuff. It doesn't have to be direct. Don't use Google images anywhere. Some people actually optimize their images for Google search just so they can find them where you've placed them later and sue you. So don't do that. Or they just send you a letter and demand thousands of dollars and you have to pay it if you can't afford to get sued. So don't ever do that. If you've already been slapped, you're going to have to pay the stupid thing. You're just going to have to. I mean, you can get a lawyer and they can try to like negotiate it down for you, but they've got you dead to rights. If you use somebody else's copyrighted content without permission, it's a strict liability type thing. So that you're kind of screwed with. But make sure you go through your site after that point, take down anything you've put up in the past that maybe you didn't know better. Now you know better. If you have social feeds that have other people's copyrighted stuff, like take it out. I know it sucks. Believe me, I do. It's one of those things where what you can do on a personal level for personal purposes is wildly different than what you would risk as a business or on behalf of a client.
Oh yeah, I've been through it before. Small business that had used someone else's images back when bots were starting to come up, and they got a letter and a fine and all that kind of good stuff. And
$4,000, one crummy beach photo on a blog post cost this poor agency like $4,000. Well, actually it was worse. So it had gone up on a client's website. They placed it on a client's blog and it was $4,000 demand. And they had to pay it, the agency did, because their client got this nasty cease and desist and it was totally legitimate, but it still sucks a lot. And then that doesn't do a lot of good things for your agency's reputation either. So, and it wasn't even a good photo, Kenneth.
Yeah,
it was a crummy, like nothing photo. So you can do better by yourself.
Exactly. Well, I'm fascinated with this subject because I've got a lot of images on my own website that all come from reputable sources that I've paid for, but I hate stock photography, absolutely hate it. However, the one thing that to that degree, Getty or iStock or whoever it is, Canva, a decent, well-known firm. I'm not even talking about Pexels, Pixabay, and Unsplash and where that could go, but just having that license is worth sometimes, and I hate to say this, from a legal standpoint, if you're on the brand side, it almost becomes more important to have that than the authenticity. And then you get a lot of phony images that I hate looking at, but at least I know I'm legally covered.
Well, you can also do work for hire, like you can have employees take photos in the course of their job, or like Stonewall Kitchen, they have invested heavily in their video and photography resources. Like they have people on staff that's what they do. And you can really tell their stuff is dynamite and it's totally custom. It's all theirs. And it's a worthwhile investment. So if you're a brand and they're not like a conglomerate, you know what I mean? They're not Disney or anything, but they recognize the value in having their own intellectual property. And so I would definitely think about that, like having someone on staff to do those things for you.
Well, in my own career, I've worked a lot in data and a lot in performance marketing. So I knew the legal teams well, for especially with data and how that was handled. But when you think of the mindset, I mean, you have a lot more of a legal brain than 99.9% of the marketers out there who are thinking about this with a little bit of a mindset shift. They probably aren't thinking about this 99% of the time anyway.
It doesn't make me popular, Kenneth. It's like
exactly.
I'm the person at the beginning of the webinar who's like, I'm reasonably sure you didn't pay to license the song you're playing right now. So.
That's right. But it's like the principal's office to me, the corporate legal is. I try to figure out how to avoid the principal with stuff like this. And I'm wondering if you have advice in general for marketers as to how they start thinking about marketing from a legal perspective, other than just don't borrow content from Google.
Yes. Well, that's actually a pretty big part of it. You want to make sure that you have a right to use anything you want to use in any of your campaigns. So if you do that, then you're already overcoming one of the most common and major obstacles legal departments run up against. Like, they're not trying to tell you no all the time, but they don't want to risk the exposure. So that's one thing. Another thing you can do is make sure that your influencer marketing efforts, that they're very well structured, that you have agreements on file that you use with people that explain what's expected. Like, hey, if we work with you, you need to disclose that you're partnering with us and what that means. Not just say, partnering might not even be clear enough. Might have to be like, I got this stroller for free, or, hey, I'm being paid to talk about the stroller, but what I say about it is what I want to say about, so you can kind of word it however you want to word it, but make sure it's clear that people understand they need to disclose with every single post as an influencer on behalf of your brand that relationship exists. So if you've already got that factored into your influencer marketing campaign, that will take care of a lot of the objections that might come up, because legal is going to be like, what about disclosure? How are people going to know we have exposure here? And you're like, we're on it. Like, everybody's going to know that they're expected to do that. And we're going to tell them how, and we're going to give them the tools and all this stuff, like templated language if we have to, for disclosures and all of that. So make that part easy. The other thing to look at is if you want to incorporate like live streaming or anything that's kind of impromptu, lawyers get really nervous about stuff like that. So make sure that you've got a plan in place. Like, you don't necessarily have to storyboard every shot of your live stream. It's probably not realistic, but definitely clear the background of wherever you're going to be to make sure that you're not going to be seeing anything private, secrets or client information on like a off board behind you, or, people's computer screens visible in the background of the office, stuff like that. So like, clear the area in which you're planning to live stream, and then make sure you're not like picking up music that's copyrighted from outside or something. Try as much as you can to control the environment. And that goes also for people kind of passing through. Like, if you're in your corporate office or in your home or in another location you can control, the lawyers are going to have a lot less to worry about than if you want to do something at like Grand Central Station, and you're going to have all these people who've not signed releases, who have no affiliation with your company, walking around. So that's another thing to think about too. Just plan your stuff out.
Yeah. It's another reason I'm using non-branded palm trees behind me, because I'm tempted to hold up a Dr. Pepper can and then if I was on the corporate side right now, it's the kind of stuff you can't do. So
see, I work for AppFire. They gave me a tumbler.
Yes.
If I show you my AppFire tumbler, that I'm sanctioned.
Well, with third parties too, so many of us in the marketing space work as consultants or for agencies, and they're all, I'm going to use air quotes that I get tired of hearing, extensions of your team. How do you recommend working with third parties who aren't going to understand the legalities? Because they'll go produce something and you can give them guardrails, you can give them brand guidelines, but then ultimately you got to make the legal team happy, as well as deliver an effective marketing project or campaign.
Well, a lot of what's going to make the legal team happy is also going to make for good content. So trying to hide the ball from your audience about like sponsored content or influencer content that's been paid for, that's not really good for you or them or anybody else. Like, eventually that stuff comes out and it looks bad for everybody. So I sort of sell it that way. Like, hey, let's keep it all above board. You need to trust people to make their own assessment of how much weight to place on your opinion, given the fact that we paid you some money. I think everybody gets that. Like, bloggers and influencers, they need to make a living. Everybody gets that. They are capable of making their own assessment of how much weight to attribute to your opinion, now that they know that you got a trip for free, or that you got money, or that you got a free stroller, or whatever. So I actually think that lawyers and their interests align a lot better with the audience or consumers and their interests than you might at first think. I mean, that's what the laws are designed to protect, is consumers, right? And so we don't want to kind of pull the wool over their eyes. That's not something you want to be part of. So that's part of it. I think the other part of it is just looking at what you're trying to create, and the more thought you put into any content or any marketing you create, the better the end result is going to be. And so looking at it from a legal standpoint doesn't make it boring or generic or worse. It just means that you've put in some thought into how you're going to execute this, how you're going to mitigate risk. I mean, that's part of it. But also, what do we actually need to do? Because some restrictions actually breed creativity. So you're like, all right, fine, we can't do it this way because you'll see too many people in the background. How can we structure this? How can we set this up so that we have more control over the environment? And that ultimately makes for better content because you don't have as many kind of snafus or things that go wrong or so I just think that any time spent planning is time well spent, whether you're thinking about legal things or about marketing generally.
Agreed. One of the things I've been thinking about since I signed up on the app, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, even more so than live streaming, this one gives me some pause.
What are we talking about? Tinder, Grinder? What are we looking at?
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse.
Because everybody and their grandmother kept saying that it was going to explode once we got brands on there.
Sure.
And having run reputation management and worked for some brands that were driving tens of millions of customers, the last thing that any corporate counsel ever wanted to know was Johnny or Susie said something stupid on Clubhouse, and now it's stickier than a tweet that disappears to some degree. And there's an audio factor around it. The consulting or the agency world, we don't really necessarily have to think of it quite the same way as the brand who's got the big logo that everybody's buying from. And I'm interested what you think about Clubhouse from a legality standpoint, because to me, it's just a minefield, even though I do enjoy it.
So I don't know that it's any better or worse than Twitter or any other social media platform, but you can't afford to hire morons. Like, you need to hire people who are articulate, thoughtful human beings. And you have to accept that sometimes they're going to say something that comes out wrong or out of context sounds wrong, or sometimes is stupid and wrong. Like, that happens occasionally. So I would say be prepared for somebody that's in your employ or somebody that's working with your brand to say like a stupid thing occasionally, because that happens. All right. But there's like stupid things, and then there's hate speech. So obviously you don't want to have any toleration for that, for hate speech, like anything that's anti-gay or racist or sexist or things like that. But then there's that, and then there's like some kind of insensitive thing that was like whatever, that out of context sounded bad. You know the difference. So don't hire morons. That's number one. Number two is to make sure that you understand any platform you're trying to participate in. Don't send marketers into Clubhouse to start dialoguing with our audience there. Like, nobody gives a rat's ass. Like, don't do that. Go and listen. And then if you have people that work for your company that are a natural fit for the space and are already there or something, okay, maybe then that's okay to have them kind of fly your flag in there. But somebody's going to record stuff, because somebody always is recording stuff. They have been since the beginning. Whether it's legal or not depends like what state you're in and all of that, but it doesn't really matter, if it's legal or illegal that they recorded it, because once something is recorded and out there, it's recorded and out there. So yeah, I mean, I don't give people a lot of primers on social media before, letting them loose as employees of a company. It's one thing if they're running your brand account, but if they're out there just being themselves and they're publicly aligned with you in some way, like I said, you just can't hire morons. It's basically it. I mean, you can't put locks on your employees the same way a country can't put locks on its citizens. Like, then they'll just wriggle out. So you just have to be like, they're good people.
I agree. I think I'm waiting for the time when somebody says something stupid and it gets picked up in the news somewhere, because it's something that created a cancel environment. The way social is now with canceling everybody, it doesn't matter what they say that can get you into trouble. And that's kind of sad for the world we're living in now anyway.
I mean, it's kind of tough. So it's sort of like the modern day equivalent of shunning, like when you would do something that the community at large disagreed with and they would shun you or whatever. But that used to only happen for really big things. And I feel like it happens for like anything, typically. But there's a difference, and everybody knows the difference between saying something that's overtly racist and saying something dumb. I mean, most people can tell. It's not like After the last couple of years, it's not like I have immense faith in humanity, but I mean, I'll go that far as to say people know the difference between like actual malice and somebody just saying a stupid thing once in a while.
Well, Kerry, I ask this of everybody. It's been on my show. Not everybody's lived in the Cape Cod area, but I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite kind of shark and why? You're on a shark's perspective. You work with a guy, famously got a picture of him riding a Viking shark.
That's yes.
Chris
I love
Brogan's
that.
logo. So
Yeah, that might be my next tattoo. No, I'm just kidding. I do like that one though. I think probably the hammerhead because it's just so funny to look at, like the eyes on either side and stuff. And I just always thought when I was a kid that was really cool. I also like the little tiny ones. Are they the tiger sharks? I'm trying to remember which ones.
tiger sharks are not tiny.
They're not. Well, there's one that's smaller, and
there are a lot that are really small.
Yeah.
Pygmy sharks, cookie cutters, epaulet sharks.
Oh, I would have remembered if it was cookie cutters. I don't think it was that. But I was at the New England Aquarium, and they have a pretty good like shark exhibit or whatever. And I like the little ones.
They probably had either bamboo sharks or little nurse sharks in there with the
a nurse shark sounds right.
Yeah, they I've seen some huge nurse sharks, but usually at aquariums you find a lot of nurse sharks because they can stick them with the rays and they get along pretty good.
I like the hammerheads. I wanted to like run around from one side of the tank to the other just so that if you turn their head and like
Yeah, well, Kerry, it's a special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I will do my level best.
All right, number 1, Anne Hanley or Chris Brogan? I'm just kidding.
Stop it. That's a ridiculous question.
But I am going to ask you one that we talked about earlier. I'm not going to do that to you, I promise.
Good.
Fruit Loops or Apple Jacks?
Oh boy. Fruit Loops, but only because they have multiple colors. They taste the same pretty much.
Not bad. All right, number 2, you're a guitar player. TaylorMade or Martin?
Oh gosh. TaylorMade.
Yeah, can't beat a TaylorMade acoustic guitar. All right, number 3, the New England Patriots or the Tennessee Titans?
Oh, come on, the New England Patriots. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm from Massachusetts. And if you don't root for the local teams, you get kind of stoned out of town. Now, CC Chapman would disagree with me because he's been a Dolphins fan for years, even though he still lives in the New England area. But,
Did you become a Tampa fan when Tom left?
That's funny. No, I didn't, but only because football doesn't mean like all that much to me. It's just you have to root for the local teams. I actually rooted for Alabama college football when we were in Florida. Yeah, because I was like, I didn't want to lose. And a lot of the conversations that took place down there were about college football. So I was like, all right, so if I want to be part of this community, I have to learn to like talk the talk. So I learned a little bit about college football and rooted for Alabama. I forget what they call those, bandwagon fans or something. I guess I was a bandwagon fan.
The former CMO of the University of Alabama has been on my show. She's a personal friend, and I used to tell people, including her, all the time, I would encourage every child to go to that school because at least once every 4 years, your kid's going to go out of there with a good degree and probably be part of a national championship. So you just have to live in Tuscaloosa for a while. All right, number 4, because I know this about you. I did a little bit of homework. Baking or coring apples?
Oh, baking for sure. I love baking. It's kind of meditative for me. Like it's more like science than art. Cooking is like art. Baking is like you have to put exactly 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda in this thing, or it's like all going to go wrong. So you can't think about other things while you're baking, which is why I like it. It's like meditation.
But your superpower is coring apples, I heard.
Coring apples. I do it quickly and try to injure as few people as possible. But I'm very fussy about, I'm a little fussy about the getting the core out cleanly and making my slices even.
Yeah. All right. Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh my God, biscuits, obviously.
Especially now that you're in the South. So
all right, there's actually in our town a store that sells only biscuits, like all different types of biscuits.
That's
every day.
I know
Fresh.
It. So, well, Kerry, where can people find out more about you? Keep up with what you're doing. You're doing a lot of podcasts. You're on You're working with Chris Brogan on the Backpack Show, which is fantastic. I'm starting to give away all the places they can find you. But where do they find out more about the Kerry Show?
Well, kind of my hub is kerry.show. That's my website. And you can find out all the different shows I work on there. Like I'm a DJ at villageradio.net, a classic alternative radio show. I do the weekly video series with Chris called The Backpack Show. It's all about business success and finding insights from unusual places. So I do that. And of course, I do fun things like this with you. And I'm full-time over at AppFire, but you can learn all about me. I'm like Kerry Gorgone on all the different platforms, even like Ello, because I signed up for all of them and then forget I did it, like when they don't go anywhere. So, I mean, I'm not like active over there, but I'm active on Twitter at Kerry Gorgone and LinkedIn, and Kerry.show is my main spot.
Awesome. Kerry, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
So there was my conversation with Kerry O'Shea Gorgone, an editor, writer, lawyer, speaker, marketer, co-host of the Backpack Show with Chris Brogan, co-host of Punch Out with Katie and Kerry, and host of a classic alternative radio show for villageradio.net. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, the big problem that she continues to see is using copyrighted content without permission. It happens all the time. Don't download and use Google images that are not in public domain. You'll get your hand slapped with some pretty painful fines. You'll spend all that time optimizing and imaging, and guess what? A bot will crawl and find your mistake, whether it's personal, a company, or agency, on behalf of a company, an influencer, etc. Don't take the risk. Trust me, it's worth an audit. The newer problem for you to think about is influencer marketing and how to do it clearly and transparently. The example she gave is a great one in a campaign where a mommy blogger uses a stroller but needs to address that they got that stroller for free, and that has to be disclosed. Second, I know this firsthand. It's important to have a discussion and an understanding with your own legal team if you have one. Kerry reminds us that they don't want to tell you no, but they do, 1, need to know if you have a right to use something in your campaigns. 2, influencer marketing stuff must include disclosure information. And 3, put a plan in place for live streaming. Think about the surroundings and what will be visible with private info, copyrighted music, etc. Third, oftentimes what makes the legal team happy will often also make for good content. And I love this point. She reminds us that lawyers are also taking the time to think of the consumer. Thinking through this likely may mitigate some risk, but it also may help you to focus on creating better content. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I'm so thankful to everyone who listens. Thank you to my sponsor and the amazing team at Drips. Please consider writing a review and letting me know your thoughts on the show. Stay out of legal trouble and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.